Okay, I'm going to start by saying a word. Of course, thank you for inviting me, especially since we agree on a lot of things, and I think we disagree on others, or at least we might have a controversy. And as I was saying, the core of what I'm doing is the art of reperception, so changing how we look and see and think. And for a few years, Jean-Louis, my associate, and I have been calling that Shapership. And Shapership is a concept we invented, and it's also a practice. So I'll talk about the concept and then the practice. And it's a concept we invented to open new windows in the mind, because obviously you understand that this word is made of to shape, the verb to shape, like in shaping a diamond, and ship, like in friendship or in craftsmanship. So a particular skill in a specific field. So shapership is the art of shaping the future, or it's the art of making the future visible. So after we have envisioned it, desirable and actionable. And as such, it's a way to look at reality as it is. So the things we consider normal or orthodox, and to look at the things as they could be in a revolutionary way, so that we can craft new realities. So I'll say a word about reality. And the idea of shapership is not a protopia, it's more a utopia in action. And I insist on the fact that utopia is not the unrealist, but the unrealized yet, as Jacques Monod said. So a utopia in action is based on a desire to transform the world with imagination and action, and not to make incremental changes, or the willingness is more exactly, if you want, to shift completely the relationship we have with the system as it is, dominant, orthodox, based on destruction, competition, and all the things we know, and to shift our relationship, the relationship we have with those ideas, so that we can get unstuck and imagine something which is radically different and based on a completely different set of values, beliefs, maps, worldviews, etc. So the idea of a utopia in action is a transformation rather than just fixing what's failing in the present or having an upgraded version of the present. And I have to say a word about reality, and I'm not pretending that I will teach you anything new, but just to make sure that we are all clear, the real is something we cannot access despite all our efforts, but reality, like all the words in E.T., is the real, what is, within the limits of our own perceptions. Like the word possibility is what is possible within the limits of our own perceptions and beliefs. So if I take this simple idea, the real is something, then we have our filters and our perceptions, which makes it possible for us to make decisions and actions. So our decisions are based on our perceptions, which are a story, a meaningful or meaning-making story we create, because we are story makers. Probably all have read Yuval Noah Harari, who talks about the specificity of the human species, or sapiens, but sapiens demens too. We are creating stories, and in fact, we are constructing reality. It's a map, and our maps might be completely incomplete, or false, or obsolete, or old, or not just. We can travel in a country like Egypt with a map of Australia, and of course, this is all the question. So Shapership as such is about utopia as desire and hope, and it's based on the idea that if you take an iceberg, the top of the iceberg is visible, but far below you have our worldviews or maps, and far below you have our intentions or purpose. So I'll come back to this, because I think that our maps, as you know, are completely invisible to us. If you take the story of those two little fishes who are just swimming together, and they cross an old fish, and the old fish asks the two, "Hey boys, how is the water?" They just don't answer. They walk away, and then one of the young fishes says to the other, "What the hell is water?" So that's a bit our situation. We navigate in a notion of ideas and concepts which are almost invisible to us, and we take them for granted. In those, in what we call reality is also the story of our future, because as you know, we have a story of our past, a story of our present, and we have a story of our future. In other words, the future we imagine is the cause of the way we live, we experience life today. For some, it's a story of apocalypse now, the end of the world. For some, it's another story, and it all depends on the way we look at the situation. So I want to emphasize one thing for us before we continue. It's the idea of a double vision. A double vision means there is the present and the future. We live in the present, we make decisions in the present, and so we are in the process of future making. And the vision of the future is, in fact, it might be a dream or not. When we talk about Shapership, the vision of the future is a big yes to a radically different future. So it's like making a hole in the jungle of the representation we have about what is possible. And this vision, transformative vision, is going to create an effect in retrospective. It's going to allow us to re-engage with our life in a different way. So the double vision means the future is a vantage point, a shift in perspective from which we reconsider completely our priorities today. That's why there is a play on word, which I love, made by, I don't remember the name of this author. He created the play on game. The future is nowhere, nowhere. And if you just move one letter, the present is now here. So when we have a future in mind, it's like Einstein, who said, a dark room is never dark when you make a hole in it and light enters in. So there is a way to open the future and enlighten the present. And I think that this means that when I practice Shapership, I use this idea that we need to, at the same time, make a lucid criticism of the world we want less of, the present, including the worldviews that support it. And we need also to be able to create an image or a series of visions of the future we desire. So before I go to the practice of Shapership, there is one more thing I want to say very briefly about hope. I prefer hope rather than optimism. To me, hope, and I have to read that sentence, sorry, I don't know it by heart, but Václav Havel said something that really inspired me about hope. He said, hope is not the conviction that something will turn well, but the certainty that something makes sense, regardless of how things turn out. Hope is the dimension of the soul and not an objective assessment of the situation. So I think that there is a leap in faith to make, and hope is a driver for action, but for me, it relies on what I call a soul compass. And let's say that a soul compass is nothing mystical, although it can be, but it's a sort of integrity of the being. And if you clearly go inside, all of us, deeply, honestly, we know at least three things. First, that the world and the way we live, or the way we live and destroy life, is not sustainable. We know that a more beautiful world is possible, and we know that it takes courage to reinvent the world. But I think that courage is the thing that is missing the most at the moment, and for it to, I would say, grow. I think we need imagination, because imagination is about options, and options makes valid decisions too. If we only know one restaurant, we cannot decide between several. So I think that as such, I'd like to tell you a short story about the future as the cause of the present. Ben Bender, who was the chief, the conductor, the chief, how do you say that? The main conductor of the Boston Philharmonic Orchestra, once said to his wife, I'm going to change completely the way I assess my students. And he was having the best musicians in the world from 5 to 12 years old in a course. And he said, the first course I give them, I'm going to give them an A. And he wrote a book about that called The Art of Possibility to show what it changes for those children. The first lesson, they received an A with one condition, to write a letter from the future, from 1 year ahead. Write a letter, but they had to write it 3 months after the first lesson, explaining why they deserved that A. And I read all the letters. And when you have a small little trombonist 5-year-old who says, I was given an A, and it changed everything in my way of playing, he became an A. And all the children became an A. So I think that the way we think about the future is in fact really existential, as Gerd says, and it's really now here, so this nowhere. And putting all that together, I want to tell you that, by the way, Shapership is what? The art of shaping the future for me is about having this capacity, the creative agency, to play with our ideas, to consider that we have good ideas and bad ideas, but they are just maps. That we have the capacity to reperceive things and think big. And it's an invitation to shift from a mad world, mad being the one we live in, which leads to massive assured destruction, to a nomad world, which leads to something else. I call it mutually assured development. And that is an invitation to shift from a perception of apocalypse now to a perception of no apocalypse, not now. In other words, Bill, sorry, not Bill, but the biologist Bruce Lipton, he created something which is absolutely fantastic. He talked about the imaginal cell metaphor, but it's a biological thing. He says, of course, we see the end of the world as we know, so that's the end of the caterpillar and probably the emergence of the butterfly. But he says something which is connected with the fact that when the caterpillar stops to grow, then the cells which are within, they start to, well, they lose their jobs, so they start to panic. They even commit suicide or apoptosis, while other cells which have always been there, and they are called the imaginal cells, they don't panic at all because they see the future. So they start to cluster. Because of the breakdown, they start to cluster, while the other from the system, the caterpillar system, they attack them. The imaginal cells start to cluster and reproduce at full speed. And because of the fact that they see the future, there is a turning point, and at one moment, the metamorphosis comes up. So about this little illustration, I think we have the choice. Either we just make, like the ostrich, we bury our head in the sand and make as if nothing was happening and continue with the SOS or same old solutions, or we just are locked in what I call apocalypse now, or the nostalgia of the future, which is what young people live now, the feeling that there is an awareness of a future forever gone, which has been stolen. Or we put our energy into creating the future we want based on unorthodox solutions. And to me, it's not about slightly incremental changes. It's because when we solve a crisis, we don't make a system change. It's about the Buckminster Fuller approach. We need to create a proposition that makes the previous system obsolete. Instead of solving problems, I think we need to dissolve them, to make them unexistent.